Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Well, very good. There was a recent article out about what was going on in Afghanistan. Believe it or not, it looks like we might have made a mistake, not only for going in and doing all that, but they wanted to get a bad guy, so we sent a drone missile, and you know they're perfect. They target a bad guy, and they can kill one individual. But it turned out that it was at a funeral, and there were 34 killed. So they didn't know what to do because we only killed terrorists. So the solution was that our officials that we control in Afghanistan, along with our government, decided that all 34 at the funeral were terrorists, and therefore this was an acceptable practice. Now, there's a Lieutenant General Hesterman who was commenting on terrorism per se, and he says that the war there against the terrorists is going very effective. I don't know what newspapers he reads or what reports he reads, but I understand ISIS is not exactly a perfect situation over there. But he said that they are so effective, they don't kill civilians, and they kill 1,000 terrorists per month, and also government troops don't get killed. I don't know about you, but I have trouble buying into this. You know, there are some people now starting to change their minds on this. Our CIA leader, John Brennan, is writing about maybe having a slightly different tone about what our foreign policy is all about.
Yeah, I was thinking back when you mentioned the 1,000 a month. Doesn't that remind you of Vietnam, where we were trying to measure our success by how many Viet Cong we killed? Meanwhile, we were losing the war.
Right, and what about the killing? Is that a success, or is that inviting more blowback?
Yeah, and the other thing about what they do with these drone strikes, they simply redefine who's a terrorist and who isn't. You can almost imagine by the terms of our own NDAA that anyone attending a funeral of a Taliban person would be supporting and aiding and abetting. So even if it was a kid, you know, but what the people there on the ground claimed is that at least 20 people were civilians who were killed, and I don't know, maybe people on the ground would have an incentive to lie, but they certainly would seem to know better.
Yeah, but what if you give them a slight benefit of the doubt that if they're a militant who wants to kill invaders, from their point, they want to get rid of foreigners, and you know that usually unifies the country, and they are unified, you know, against foreign occupation. But even those who are terrorists, by their definition, are people who see themselves as defending, you know, their own country. Now, there was one comment, I think it was in the John Brennan article, that said the definition for a terrorist is anybody who resists our American occupation of these countries.
That makes it pretty convenient then. I remember the Obama administration redefining a terrorist was any male of military fighting age. And so that would relieve them of the burden of proving that they were all actual terrorists. It just means they all are.
I want to take a closer look at this article by John Schwartz. The title is CIA Director John Brennan admits U.S. foreign policy could spur terrorism.
Wow.
Maybe he's reading our stuff, and maybe he's understanding. But let's not get our hopes up too high. But he was on Face the Nation this past week, and I want to just read a quote from him. And I think it's rather astounding and educational. I think the president has tried to make sure that we're able to push the envelope when we can protect this country. But we have to recognize that sometimes our engagement and direct involvement will stimulate and spur additional threats to our national security interests.
That's it. How would you interpret that to the viewers? It's government speak, but maybe you can translate.
Well, you know, the one thing is that he didn't say national security. I talk about national security and say that our intervention hurts our national security because we invite retaliation and blowback. But he makes it a little vaguer. He didn't talk about national security per se, that we want to have a secure country and we don't want to be invaded. He talks about our interests, and you know, that's open-ended. That means the interest of the military-industrial complex, the interest of the banking individuals, the banking industry. Is it the interest of oil? Is it the interest of our allies? It means anything and everything, so therefore they go and end up doing these terrible things.
I mean, literally from A to Z, Afghanistan to Zambia is in our interest, according to that.
Right.
But it is an interesting change of heart, or at least the opening of his eyes to admit this, because Brennan was a very controversial figure. He was a national security advisor. He was a counterterrorism advisor to President Obama, and at the time he was known as, quote, the high priest of targeted killings. That was his big thing, and he was also a chief defender of the CIA's use of torture.
But he had no trouble getting reappointed as CIA director. If the definition is that you're a terrorist if you, have a retaliation against United States president, it reminds me of two instances. One I've mentioned before, and that is that when I was trying desperately to stop the war in Iraq, I argued in committee, and I said, well, they haven't committed aggression against us. And one congressman said, Dr. Paul, we know you will know all about this Constitution and we should declare war, but they have committed aggression. They've been shooting at our airplanes. Here the airplanes are going over, bombing and killing. And they're using like a BB gun. They never hit anything and never brought an airplane down. But that was their justification. But that idea hasn't died. Just recently, we had a senator from South Carolina make an announcement. And didn't he say something very similar to that?
Yeah, he did. He said it was about the Iraq War. He would have done it all over again the exact same way because they were aggressing against our planes as we bombed them.
Yeah, and this is really a big problem. But that came up in the presidential races because they asked, Jeb Bush sort of got into trouble. Well, did you support your brother's war? And he said, oh, sure, I'd do it over again. And all of a sudden, he had to backtrack, and every candidate had to be asked that. And so now they're not as enthusiastic. So, and here we have Brennan, who's not as enthusiastic, and it may cause blowback. But what about Rumsfeld? Is he having some second thoughts as well?
I don't know, because when the neocons are caught in a mistake, the neocons are terrific for having their fingers up to test the wind. And they sense that the wind is blowing differently, and I think that's what Rumsfeld did. He was interviewed by the Times of London over the weekend, where he said that, Bush got this whole thing wrong, pushing democracy. All countries aren't the same. We can't put our template on other countries, and this sort of thing. So it's a way of sort of distancing himself from what I think you pointed out is the increased perception among Americans that the Iraq War was an absolute loser, and that's why Bush had to change his tune.
But they remain interventionists. We can say it was all bad from the very beginning. They should have done it because intervention is a bad idea. But they go, and when their bad ideas backfire on them, then they say, well, it's just the fact that we were promoting democracy, and they're not much for democracy. Rumsfeld even went to the point, but one really good thing that came out of killing Saddam Hussein is we brought Gaddafi to the table, and he did what we asked him. He got rid of his nuclear weapons and this sort of thing. Yeah, and then for him to have capitulated, then they kill him.
Yeah.
So this doesn't go unnoticed in the Arab world that they can't be trusted. So it to me is a real shame that they never seem to back away. And to me, it's the issue of interventionism. Interventionism is one time says it leads toward bad results. It doesn't lead to it. It is a bad issue, just the idea and the principle. But interventionism gives them leeway. It's sort of like intervention in the economy. You can do anything you want, anytime you want, and you can react for special interests because our job is to intervene and take care of the economy. In foreign policies, it's the same way. That's why they flip-flop. One day we're fighting somebody, the next day they have all our weapons and they're fighting us. And someday the American people are going to have to wake up and say, interventionism doesn't work.
Yeah.
And we have another option.
It's the philosophy. It's the philosophy. That's the core philosophy of the neocons, both in the Democratic and the Republican Party. And so there's no way they'll let that go. If anything, I mean, you could look at the Brennan quote and say he's recognized that blowback is real, but his response to it might be, that means we need to double up on the size of our military so we can, we can address this threat. So it's never that we should back off.
Yeah, and Rumsfeld, even though he capitulated a little bit, we shouldn't do it. He's for expanding the Cold War, fight it differently, have a bigger national force that we can control. So they never change the principle. And, ideas ideas are really what drive the country. I'm always arguing good ideas are what we need, and they can't be stopped by governments. And this is what Rumsfeld hints at. We're having trouble with these governments. We're fighting ISIS, and they don't even belong to a government. Yeah, but they grab hold of an idea, and it's been radicalized because we have established conditions where it's easy to radicalize the people when they see foreign invaders. And I think that our foreign policy is so detrimental, and it's not detrimental in the way Brennan argues to our national security interests. It's detrimental to our national security and our financial security, and when you think about it, to our personal liberties here at home. And all you have to do is look at these guys like Brennan and the NSA on what they have done to our freedoms here at home.
Yeah, I'd like to see the list of the donors to the Rumsfeld Foundation. I bet we wouldn't be very surprised.
I wonder if there's any overlap with the Clinton Foundation. Thank you very much for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and come back soon.